are back with Adam Whittington from PRC for our final part of this special series. One of the issues, Adam, that you and I talked about when we were setting this interview up was there are some issues with mainstream media in regard to how they report these sorts of cases in terms of the language that they use and things like that. So could you expand on that and what your issues are?
Well, my issues are that they don't report hardly anything, and the reporting they do is just completely edited and manipulated to, they're just not doing enough. I don't like the mainstream media for that reason. I think they're half the problem with, child trafficking and exploitation. They have such a platform that they can use to raise awareness and educate parents. They just don't do it, and it's a major problem. And this is why I do not speak to. Obviously, one of the reasons why I don't speak to mainstream media, because if we give them a story, I can guarantee you it'll be changed by the time it goes to print. And it's just not what we're about. We want facts and correct information being put out there. So it's a problem.
And one of the other things that we talked about was the language that they use in terms of child pornography and things like that. It almost sexualizes it in a way, and I understand that it is a sexual crime, but you prefer things like child rape videos and things like that to call it what it is.
Well, you got to call it what it is. How's pornography connected to a child being raped? There's nothing pornographic about it, so let's start. And this is one thing we try and put out with our social media is let's start. If you're going to educate yourself on the correct terminology. As an example, sex tourism. That's a term that organizations, the governments use for pedophiles traveling to rape children. What's sexual about it? There is nothing sexual about it. It shouldn't be called sex tourism. So there's a lot of different terminologies that have been used for many years by the mainstream media and authorities. But recently I have been noticing, I am in contact with the AFP, some high up officers, and they are changing things. So I give the AFP a lot of credit recently, actually. The efforts they're going into helping online grooming and child exploitation is tremendous. So I can only speak highly of the AFP at the moment for the work that the money, the resources they're throwing into helping Australian children.
And how do you feel about sentencing in Australia?
What's that? There is no sentencing. Australia doesn't have sentencing for pedophiles, sex offenders. It's horrible. And everybody says we need to change laws. It's not the laws, guys. It's the judges. The judges refuse, absolutely blatantly refuse to sentence what they can, maximum terms or even decent sentences for sex offenders. And asking me why, that's the $1 million question. Why don't judges, for such heinous crimes against children, why do they just let them back in the communities? Why? I don't know.
In researching for this part of our conversation, I was trying to search and find Australian standards for sentencing, and it was incredibly difficult to find anything. What kept coming up in search after search, and I worded my search in every different way you could possibly imagine. And what would come up were the stories of some of Australia's worst offenders that had been going overseas, specifically to Southeast Asia, and they were given pretty harsh sentences. And so reading that, I kind of thought, well, that's great. But then I came across a story about a father who had raped his child for 9 years. He had videoed it. There was a lot of very graphic detail in a very short article, and I'm sure that's not even the worst of what happened. He then also uploaded the footage online because he got a thrill from knowing others would watch it. Prosecutors recommended that he received the maximum sentence for all 61 charges he was up on. And because he pled guilty, the judge sentenced him to, I believe, 14 years. The maximum would have been 156. So prosecutors were asking for 156 and he got 14. And that made my blood run cold.
Yeah. It's there was a case in Sweden, right? The biggest Swedish pedophile case. A man was arrested and charged for sexually abusing 110 children. This is the biggest case, right, in Sweden. The harshest sentence he got in all of Sweden's history, 8 years. Now, if you break that down, 110 children, that's 26 days he got in prison for each child. 26 days for sexually abusing one child. How is it possible? So it's not just Australia that has the problem. It is worldwide, predominantly in Western countries. But if you go into the Middle East, African countries, the sentences are real. You're talking death. You're talking real sentences. But Western countries, Australia, is shocking. It's shocking.
There seems to be public outrage when they are handed like sentences, though. So where is the disconnect with the judges? Because when you speak to people about this issue, and anybody that I certainly know thinking about a child being harmed says, hang them, let them into general population, let them be dealt with by the other prisoners. Why is there this disconnect on the side of the judges? Are they not understanding the ramifications? Because from all my reading, the aftermath of a child being sexually abused, assaulted, whatever the correct terminology is depression, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, suicide. I mean, these are lifelong things that these children need to get over as they move into adulthood if they're able to make it there. How are they not seeing that?
Because the bottom line is they're disconnected. They're disconnected, the judges, with the reality of what happens to the victims and the future consequences for the victims. There is no connection between the judge. And I've spoke to Sonia Ryan from the Carly Ryan Foundation, who we're quite close with. And she says the same thing. She struggles. She's right in there with politicians, and she struggles to get these sentences tougher. And we talked about this same question not long ago, actually. And it comes down to judges not being, they're just disconnected from the victims. And this is what we believe is half the problem.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So my understanding is that on a federal level, they can only determine sentence lengths for perpetrators that have gone overseas and committed these acts. They can't determine what the state's sentences are. So this all needs to change on a state level.
Yeah, all states have different laws, right? So whatever states, as an example, the Carly Ryan Foundation has got Carly's law in place in South Australia. She's trying to get it into Queensland and all this sort of stuff. So it's a tough thing, even trying to get new legislation brought in. But then you go through years of trying to get the new legislation like Sonia Ryan has, which is amazing, the work she's doing. It stops with the judge. The judges have the final say, and they're just not upholding the tough sentences that they have within their power to give.
I was also reading in regard to sentencing, because there was a push to, I think it was actually reading about the federal legislation about maximums and minimums. And there was a leading body, I think, for lawyers. And I can't think of her name right now, but she was saying that she doesn't believe there should be minimum sentences. And her logic was that juries would then find lower range cases not guilty because they would be afraid of these offenders
Yeah,
getting too much time in prison. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I mean, for me, because we confront these people all the time, so we know firsthand what they do. And one thing that we know 100% is they reoffend. There's no paedophile that we know that has not reoffended. Some reoffend within 24 hours, whether that's starting online grooming again or sexually abusing their own child. It's I'm all for the death sentence because people have to understand when a child is raped or sexually abused, they carry that for the rest of their lives. They have a life sentence. While you have pedophiles who are freely walking around our communities, uh, preying on children, and it's a massive problem. And how do you combat that? I mean, look at the statistics in other countries in the Middle East that have the death sentence. It's lower. You know, it's much lower. So there's no incentive for Australian pedophiles to worry about, you know, anything. They know they're going to get caught, and they know they've got legal defense. They know that they'll get off or get a light sentence. If they do get a sentence in prison, which is usually a short term, they'll be segregated with other pedophiles, so they're safe. They're protected in prisons, and we find that's a massive problem because if you have a pedophile who's just getting into it and he goes into prison for a short period with a very experienced pedophile, it's a school, right? It's a pedophile school. They educate each other how to do things, how to not get detected online, how to get into the dark web, where to search on the dark web to join other pedophiles to share, you know, horrific images and videos of kids. So it's a school, it's a breeding ground within the prison. So there's a lot of problems. Um,
It almost feels like if you overcome one problem, you've then got another. Do you think that prison overcrowding or prison capacity has anything to do with lighter sentences?
I really don't know. I just know that pedophiles, in particular in Australia, have no fear of the authorities.
And so are there any politicians that you're working with that you think are amazing, or any others that need to step up? I mean, how do we as the general public help move the needle on this issue?
Yeah, we get that question all the time too, you know, and we haven't got time to do rallies and stuff because we're so busy actually online. We're in the dark web 24/7 trying to catch these, you know, trying to, you know, help children from trying to search for them through the images and videos we see online. The amount of work we do with sting operations and educating local people. So we don't have time to put petitions together and stuff like that. But then again, you know, what does a petition do? Where does it go? Does it make a change? I mean, the only way I can see actually something happening because the Australian politicians couldn't care less. There's no politician that pushes this. Darren Hinch did when he was senator. He's not a senator anymore, so you know we've lost that. But there is no other politician who actually has enough balls to stand up and you know help kids. You might get a politician come out with a quick statement before election. Yes, if you vote for me, then I'll support children. Well, that's just garbage. There is nobody. It has to come from the top, you know. And if I had my way, I'd be prime minister, and we could change everything. You know, they come out with COVID laws and restrictions within 24 hours, 48 hours. You know, I would change things immediately, but it's got to come from the top. You know, I don't see any change happening too soon by people starting petitions and trying to get this and that. It's got to come from the top. You know, there needs to be a leader who prime agenda must be child safety. Until that happens, I don't see any change.
Well, maybe with this going on air, we'll put a fire under some people and we can maybe affect some change. Adam, we could talk about this all day and try and solve the problems of the world, but we are going to leave it here. I look forward to having you back on the program, though, when your app is up and running, and we can have a deeper look at that and get everybody downloading it, because hopefully world travel will begin again sometime soon. Adam Whittington from Project Rescue Children.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.